President Obama just released his plan on immigration, and it involves his executive actions. Now, we're not going to get into whether it's a good idea or not. That's an entirely different issue. What we're going to talk about in this one is what he is doing with these executive actions legal? Is it constitutional for him to enforce it in this way and to, in some ways, bypass Congress? All right, so first, what is the plan? The plan is that he's going to grant up to 5 million people that are illegal immigrants or unauthorized immigrants protection from deportation. That just means they're not legal citizens, they're just not going to be deported. Just to put that into perspective, there are 11 million illegal immigrants that we suspect are in the United States right now. So 5 million of them are going to be affected by this executive action. Now, there's two general groups that this applies to. The first group is parents that have lived here in this country for 5 years and have children that are citizens or are legal residents. So that's the first group. The second group is young people who were brought into this country illegally as of 2010. So people that were brought in here before they were actually adults and before the year 2010. So those are the two different groups that this affects. They're also required to do a few things first. They have to register, they have to pass a criminal background check, and they have to pay taxes. Now, what Obama is doing is he's taking law enforcement, and he's not saying we're not deporting anybody, but he's going to focus on criminals. So law enforcement is going to be directed towards that particular group, the people that are committing crimes, and in his words, not families. Criminals, not families. Now, let's start out with the group that says what he is doing is not constitutional. All right, this group thinks that he's violating law, he's violating the Constitution by doing this type of executive order. The first argument that they make is that there's this clause in the Constitution called the Faithful Execution Clause, or the Take Care Clause. And what that states is that the president shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. That is in Article 2, Section 3. They claim that the president's not enforcing the law for these 5 million people who are here illegally. Now, the problem with this argument is that the court has never struck down an executive action on grounds of the Take Care Clause. So that's never happened. But they say this is an unprecedented number of people. There has never been this type of basically looking the other way and letting people break the law for 5 million people at once. Okay, so that's where the opponents think that they have some grounds for this. They also think that he's violated democratic principles. We just had an election and his party was soundly defeated. So the fact that he is bypassing Congress and just changing how immigration is enforced is not listening to the people. Now, the problem with this argument is that you can violate democratic principles, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing something illegal or unconstitutional. So yes, maybe it is in poor taste and it's not listening to the people of the country based on the election. However, that doesn't matter in this case necessarily, because if he's not violating the law, then it's not unconstitutional. Then some people, even that are supporters of President Obama, say it's a dangerous precedent. They say that if he starts to just choose which types of a law, which parts of a law he's going to enforce, future presidents could use this same power. So for instance, say a Republican gets into the presidency and can't pass a change to the tax code, he could say something like, okay, the people that are in the 35% tax bracket, you only have to pay 25%, and we're not going to enforce or come after you. We're just going to go after other people and with this tax. That's just an example, but it's a way that this could open up the floodgates for presidents to use this power and possibly abuse it in the future. Lastly, a lot of his critics point to the president's own words. He was actually a constitutional law professor before he became president, so he knows a lot about this. And he actually said in 2011 that the notion that somehow I can just change the laws unilaterally is not true. The fact of the matter is that there are laws on the books and I have to enforce them. So in a way, he kind of pinned himself into a corner there by saying, I can't just not enforce a law if it's on the books. Okay, so that's the side that says he is violating the Constitution. Now let's take a look at the other side of this argument, saying that yes, he does have the power to do this. He's not violating any laws. First, they point to what's called prosecutorial discretion. That means that he's just exercising his power to select which parts of the law are a priority. And the way he justifies this is that Congress hasn't granted him enough money, or the executive branch enough money, to actually enforce the law against these 11 million illegal immigrants. He's saying that the government has to prioritize this out of necessity. They have no choice. They just don't have the funding or the means to do that. It's kind of the same idea of a law enforcement agent, a police officer, even a local town, turning a blind eye to somebody that's maybe going 60 and a 55 or 55 and a 50. However, they'll pull over somebody doing 65 or 70. It's their discretion, and they're enforcing the law based on practicality, because you can't enforce it all the time. And actually, someone who is an expert in immigration policy from a Republican or a conservative group said that if his actions just channel enforcement resources to other areas covered under the law, then it is within his discretion to do so. So that's even coming from the other side of the aisle. Okay, the other thing that's in Obama's favor here is that past precedent. Presidents have done this all the time. He said it in his speech going back several decades. And actually, Bill Clinton, former president and also a Democrat, said, "As far as I can tell, every president in the modern era has issued some executive orders affecting immigration." So I imagine he's on pretty firm legal footing. Okay, he danced around his words there a little bit, but for the most part, Bill Clinton says that he has the precedent. And also, if you look at George H.W. Bush, back in the 80s, 90s, he granted 1.4 million illegal immigrants deferral from deportation. So he's done the same thing, and that was a Republican a couple decades back. Other presidents who have used similar executive powers on immigration include JFK, Richard Nixon, and Ronald Reagan. Okay, and lastly, President Obama said this in his speech too: if Congress doesn't like the way he's enforcing the law, they can pass a law to change it. So actually, the laws that are on the books now give President Obama this leeway and this room to enforce it in different ways. Congress could strip him of those powers if they pass a new immigration law. So if they do that, they can get rid of this prioritized enforcement if they really choose to do so. The only problem with that, of course, is that they would have to get by a presidential veto. So whether there would be enough votes for an override, probably not. But that's the last step, is if Congress doesn't like it, they could pass a new immigration law changing it. Okay, my take on this is that he has pretty good legal standing, in that most of the research I've done points to that fact. There is the precedent that's there in the past for the other presidents. There's the concept of enforcing and prioritizing based on need and lack of funding, and also the fact that this has never been challenged before in the courts. The only thing that may open up the door in the future is that this is an unprecedented scale, and it could end up going to the courts in the future, but pretty unlikely that this stuff would get overturned. The only thing that's certain in this is that this issue is not going away. They're going to be debating immigration at least through the end of this presidency, and I'm sure it's going to be a big topic leading up to the 2016 presidential race. Okay, I hope that helped. If you have any questions, leave some comments or questions below in the video comment section. Also, subscribe if you like this video to Flipped History videos. I'm out.